Do you usually also talk about how much you sold the company eventually?
I can't really say exactly, but I've been saying mid seven figures is where we are.
Welcome to the Never Employed Chat. My name is Sam, and I interview people who make a living beyond salary jobs, entrepreneurs, business owners, and investors, so that we can learn from their stories together. There are many great ways to make a living, and even more ways to wealth. At Never Employed, we encourage you to think of alternatives to employment jobs. What would you do if a salary job was simply no option? I'm here with Anna today. You founded and ran and eventually sold Boondockers Welcome. Do I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Maybe you can just talk a little bit about it. What is it?
Yeah, so Boondockers Welcome is a platform for RVers or camper vans, sort of. I know depending on where you are in the world, we call it different things, but North America RV recreational vehicle users that allows them to connect with hosts who will let them stay on their property for a night or two for free. Um, I started the company, we launched in 2012, and my co founder was my mother, who had been RVing for probably 10 or 15 years by that point, and was sort of the subject area expert when it came to RVing. And I have a technical background. I'm a computer engineer by training. So I was the technical side, the technical co founder.
Cool. So you actually not only founded it together with your mom, but you also ran the whole business together.
Yeah, we did. She, towards the end, she sort of stepped back a little bit. She's, obviously a little older. She's in retirement age now and wanted to sort of not spend more time actually traveling, which is what, her love of that is what's prompted us to start the business in the first place. So towards the end, we hired a customer support and marketing person to sort of help take over some of the pieces that she had been responsible for. And I moved more into the CEO role from, I guess, the CTO role, which I mean, all these titles are kind of meaningless when it's like a two-person company. But yeah, that's how it worked. And when we sold, we were 50-50 shareholders. So we split the proceeds evenly.
Okay. That doesn't mean that you personally don't really have so much experience with this like van life.
I am definitely not a van lifer. I do have, like, we have a travel trailer and we have two school age kids. So we'll go camping for a week or two during the summer. But the vast majority of Boondockers Welcome users and members are people who are traveling much more regularly than that, either van lifers who are sort of on the road full time, or often people like, my mother who are in retirement or semi-retirement age will go on, multi-month long trips. And that's really the target market for Boondockers Welcome is people who are doing sort of, the North American tour and trying to travel for long periods of time and do it affordably.
Okay. And so how did this idea in general evolve, or how did it become a actual business? Was it like you had the idea, or your mom had the idea? How did this work?
It was definitely my mom's idea. She had been RVing sort of on and off. They had gone on like a year-long trip and then, several sort of 6-month trips over the years. And she had actually developed quite a following. She had started sort of publishing online these travel guides just for finding free campsites all across, mostly in the southwestern United States. So she had built up a little bit of a following and had sort of, a newsletter that had several thousand subscribers to it, and just sort of people following her blogs and her travel guides for finding these free campsites. And she came to me with this idea for essentially we called it like driveway surfing, right? Like was familiar. One of my cousins had done a lot of couch surfing. She was familiar with the concept of that. And she said, I'd love to be able to create sort of a driveway surfing community for RVers. And originally when she came to me, she was asking mostly my opinion on, who she could hire to design the site, because she didn't have any technical development background, and how much I thought it would cost. And I happened to be at the time on maternity leave with my first child. So I said, hey, why don't we partner on this together? And I wasn't a web developer by trade. I was like a firmware software engineer, but I said, how hard can it be? So she would come over sort of once or twice a week and hang out with her new grandson, while I, plugged away on trying to develop my very first website. I mean, I had done like, your standard profile websites or whatever before, but sort of my first web app. And it took a lot longer than it would have if I had, not been trying to raise babies. And I did eventually go back to my full-time job for a little bit in there too. So it took a while for us to actually launch Boondockers Welcome. But then by then she had she had already developed a pretty good newsletter list, like I said, and we were able to use that to sort of seed the initial host base. So all of our hosts were people that had read her guides and were RVers themselves, and they would offer to let people come stay on their property for free when they were at home. And then when they were traveling, they would stay with other hosts. So it was a win-win situation for them.
Yeah, this definitely sounds like a really, really cool idea. And it also sounds like your mom actually did the initial sales and marketing work, which is, very required in the beginning, and which is probably a very, very hard part for many, many people who start to build their own businesses.
Yeah, especially in something like this. Very much Boondockers Welcome functioned like a two-sided marketplace, right? And I mean, it's not the kind of business that anybody would ever suggest you try to start out, especially as like a bootstrapped indie founder, right? Most of the two-sided marketplaces out there have tons of venture capital money behind them, because it takes a lot of marketing to get the footprint that you need to really get off the ground. We were lucky that, my mom had a good list and a good in there, and it was still sort of early in the this was like 2012. People were really just sort of being able to travel with decent internet access, right? So it used to be you would have to go find your internet cafe or whatever to book your next campground. So this suddenly we had sort of hit that sweet spot where we were the first people to offer this. Like even things like Hip Camp and sort of the Airbnb of RVing, which works on a different model than we did, but even they hadn't really hit the market yet at that point. So it was just sort of the right timing and the right place for us.
Mm-hmm. And this also explains to some extent why you obviously don't need a very, very huge Twitter following, which is something which probably many people think when they start with their own indie hacker businesses or whatever businesses. When always there's always this question of audience first, or build an audience first, or build the business first.
I mean, so we did have an audience for sure, because we had my mom's audience. But yeah, like I had a Twitter account, but I was never on there. So I certainly wasn't, building audience there. And that's not really where our target market was, right? You have to go out and find them. And I mean, in the end, Facebook ended up being really our best opportunity to reach customers. We had a very, very popular Facebook group that was sort of open to anybody to contribute to, and there was a lot of current members would essentially sell it to people who were interested, and we didn't have to do anything except sit back and moderate a little bit. And that's just, again, it's like it depends on your demographic. Our demographic were, there are definitely young people who are in their 20s and 30s who would use it, but the vast majority of our customers were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and did you actually started this Facebook group, or was it an already existing Facebook group?
We did start a Facebook group specifically for Boondockers Welcome. And that was sort of once we had critical mass and enough people who, we had some forums on a previous version of the site. And then when we decided the forums were not really the best use of our technical efforts. And so we just essentially scrapped them and said, we're moving to a Facebook group, and, our members were happy to join. And like I said, they did a fantastic job of recruiting new members for us.
But it doesn't mean that you initially tried to connect people manually, but you already started from the beginning on building the platform and giving this platform to the people to use it and to connect with each other, like digitally and automatically, so to say.
Yeah, exactly.
And you already mentioned that you have this technical background, which, probably made it a little bit easier for you to start this kind of tech business compared to people who are just learning to code. Do you think that this is a very huge advantage, or do you think that it's even possible to start, like indie hacking businesses without knowing to code that much?
It probably gave me a bit of an advantage, but I honestly, so much of the background that I have is much lower level than you really need to run a web business, right? The technical programming skills, like I used, Python on the Django framework. And the skills you need to, I think, pick that up, or the time you need to pick up those skills is not, you don't need a 4-year engineering degree to do that. You can pick that up. I think anybody who's willing to put the time in can pick that up relatively quickly. Things that I did then that I wouldn't do again, though, were like trying to do all my own DevOps, because that's just a real pain, just, administering boxes and trying to deal with loads and things like Heroku make that just so much easier. And that's something that I don't know if Heroku was available when I first set out, or if it was just something that I wasn't as aware of, but as long as you're willing to pay a little bit of money to let somebody take that off your plate, I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Okay. So you basically recommend to use these cloud hosting services compared to running and everything on your own.
I used a DigitalOcean droplet, so it wasn't like I was hosting a box in my basement or anything, but just, I maintained the operating system and sort of did a lot more work than I think a 1 or 2 person company really has the time to do. And you need to be able to focus your efforts on things that move the needle more than making sure that your operating system has the most recent patches on it.
Yeah, okay. And we both already mentioned the term indie hacker. Now, I'd say you don't appear like the average indie hacker, but you seem to still be part of that peer group. How do you feel about that, and how is it for you to be part of that indie hacker group?
I think the way I don't appear is because I'm older than most of them. But though it was, for me, I went for a long time running the company without having that peer group. I didn't really know that it existed, or I listened to it, like Startups for the Rest of Us podcast. I would listen to that sometimes and feel like, I feel like maybe I could benefit from some of these people, but I still, I had a lot of self-doubt at that point and a lot of imposter syndrome. And once I finally got over that and was willing to put myself out there and be a part of those communities, it made a huge difference marketing is a lot easier when you have an audience and when you have people who want to hear what you want to talk about, for sure. And I've, talked to lots of people on lots of podcasts since I sold it, which doesn't do me much good, but it it definitely, I'm really glad that I'm part of that community, and I think I still get a lot from it. And I think I'm happy to, share my experiences now so that the younger whippersnappers can learn from my mistakes. Maybe. I think we all have to make our own mistakes to some degree. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's a very, very, very good point, and probably something that's worth learning, early. And was this actually was Boondockers your first business, or did you already try to build your own businesses before?
No, it was my first business. I never really thought about the idea of entrepreneurship. Like, I know your tagline is like, I've never been employed and never planned to be, or something like that. And that was never something that even really crossed my mind. I mean, I went and I got that, engineering degree, and, was able to get good paying jobs. And I mean, my mother, who was my co-founder, was a waitress, and like that was a huge step up from, the sort of blue collar upbringing that I had. That I was able to go and get that job, and good paying professional career. And so the idea of entrepreneurship didn't really even cross my mind. And then when my mom came to me with the idea, it was kind of like, oh, well, I'll do this as a fun side project while I'm, on my maternity leave, which in Canada, we at that time got 12 months of maternity leave, which is fantastic. And so it was just a good opportunity for me to sort of keep my brain sharp while I was at home with babies. And it really, it got to the point where I was making more than my full-time job eventually. And it was, I quit my full-time job before the company was really that profitable. But it was a decision that I never would have seen coming. I mostly quit for family balance purposes, because my husband was traveling a lot for his job, and I was still trying to work full time, and kids were young, and school, and kids get sick, and daycare people bail on you, and it's just all sorts of craziness. And so I quit my job mostly so that I could have some family life balance, but that meant that I had more time to put into the business. And then eventually I became an entrepreneur. So I don't know. I feel like I'm an accidental entrepreneur in that respect. It was not really ever anything I aimed to do. But just circumstances led me there. And then it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
That's great. And so, since you've already talked about your family life and having kids while starting your own business, maybe how was it for you? You talked about this already a little bit, but was maybe the maternity leave even your advantage in the end?
Yes and no. I mean, the maternity leave was sort of, I think, the thing that spurred me to say, I'll do this while I'm home. It took me, probably a year and a half to actually launch the website. So it was certainly not just the maternity leave. It was, hacking on evenings and weekends, just like everybody else once I went back to work. I mean, I think I had unfair advantages in that, yes, I had a maternity leave. I had, my mother who would come and hang out with the kids so I could work sometimes. And then, eventually when I quit my full-time job, I had a husband who had a very good paying job that allowed me to do that. So I had a lot of advantages that not necessarily everybody has. But I think, when I was home with the kids, that's still like a full-time job, right? So you're still finding, and my mom wasn't always here taking the kids, multiple days a week. So you're still forced to find time to work, right? In the evenings and the weekends, or, I was lucky if I was able to put my then 3-year-old in like preschool a few mornings a week. So I would have like 2 hours, 3 days a week where I would drop them off at daycare, and then I would go to the library that was like around the corner, and it's like I had 2 hours. If I got there, dropped them off, and just sat down, that's like, what can I get done in these 2 hours? And it does force you to really be sort of strict with your time, right? It's like, I only have this much time, what can I get done? So, I mean, those are skills that I think translate to anybody who's trying to launch a product while running a full-time job or doing anything.
Yeah, definitely. So, in the end, you just say that it's very important as a founder and as a person who runs a business to be able to, schedule things and to wake up to do what's needed in order to build a successful company in the end, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I still struggle with that, prioritizing things. It's very easy to get sidetracked into, shiny object syndrome. And I am your typical developer who wants to build features and not do marketing. And but that is really the lesson, right? Is that you have to find the time and schedule the time to do all those pieces.
Mm-hmm. And eventually you sold the company. When did this become clear, or when did you start to think of this opportunity?
So I had mentioned that my mom had sort of stepped back from some of the day-to-day running of the company, and that happened probably in 2019, I guess. She sort of stepped back, and we hired someone to take over for her. And it was an amazing hire. It was a great choice. And that was actually a difficult, there's a story actually where we almost sold the company before we hired her, because I knew that, my mom wanted to retire. I wasn't necessarily sure I felt comfortable hiring anybody. I didn't think of myself as sort of an employer. I still liked the idea of working solo. Hiring somebody stressed me out. But then I actually went to MicroConf, the sort of conference for bootstrapped and mostly bootstrap founders, in 2019. And we actually had an offer from somebody to buy the company for, it was probably, I think it was about $500,000 Canadian dollars at the time was the offer that we had, which was nothing. And, a few $100,000 each would have been lovely. And at that time we thought we were just about to sign that. And then I went to this conference and sort of met all these people this was the first time I had really interacted with sort of the community. And I met all these people who were struggling to even come up with ideas, or it's still at that, starting phase where you're just trying to get your first, $1,000 of MRR. And I realized that, we actually had something pretty special, and we were, much more successful than I think I was really willing to admit to myself. I came home really invigorated, thinking, no, I can do this. All these people can do it. I can do it too. And so we didn't sell, and we hired someone to take over for my mom so she could step back. And we ran the company for another 2 years that way. And when we did finally sell, it wasn't necessarily that I was ready to be done, but it's kind of just a question of timing, right? We had a pandemic. Really, RVing took off. We had, a great growth for the first sort of year of the pandemic. And another company in the space that we had been friendly with, and I had chatted with the CEO a couple of times. He had expressed interest a couple of times before. And as it turned out, they raised a bunch of capital last year in the spring. And then they just came to us and said, look, what do we have to do to make these two companies join together? And we kind of said, this seems like a pretty good time based on, market, like where the market's going, who knows what's going to happen in the future. The buyer was the best possible buyer. We knew that Boondockers Welcome is so focused on community, and we didn't want to just sell out. We wanted to make sure that this community that we had built was able to be sustained by an acquirer. And the company that bought us is called Harvest Host. They had a very similar community. Most of our members were also members of their community, so it was really just an excellent opportunity, the best buyer we could really hope for our company to keep growing and maintain the same reason tetra that we had started with. And so, yeah, we just said, this is the best time. This is a great offer from a great company. And that was what made the decision.
It's awesome to hear that you're very happy with this. And since you already talked a little bit about numbers, do you usually also talk about how much you sold the company eventually?
I can't really say exactly, but I've been saying mid 7 figures is where we are. Yeah.
It's cool. And so how did this eventually change your life? I mean, this is probably what many people would like to have for their lives when they start. How did this change your life?
You think it's going to change your life, but remarkably, it doesn't change it all that much. Is really the answer. I mean, maybe if you sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, it does. Definitely, like, there's stresses removed. I don't feel like I have to go out and get a full-time job now. I am starting another company, and I'm taking my time and not being too stressed out about when my MRR reaches a certain point or anything. But it doesn't help very much that the market kind of, I invested most of the money, and the market's kind of done this a little bit in the interim. So that certainly doesn't help make you feel like, you had this great exit. But still, I mean, I have nothing to complain about. It's definitely changed our lives in that, I mean, I have the freedom to choose to do what I want now.
That's really cool, but that's also a very, very interesting transition, because I don't want to go too deep into this topic, but what you just mentioned is that you basically became an investor, so making a living as an investor compared to being employed or running your own business, which is definitely an interesting change in life, I think.
Yeah, well, my view of investing is still pretty long term. I'm not, trying to necessarily bring in a big income right now. So it's a lot of just stick it in some index funds and don't look at it. So I'm not a very active investor. I'm mostly active at trying to prevent myself from seeing what my balance is on any given day, for fear that it makes me, freak out. So
yeah. And you didn't even, like, quit working, so to say. It's not that you just sold your company and then you live in the paradise or something like this. But actually, you funded another company, which is called Subscribe Sense, right?
yes, that's right.
What do you do there?
So one of the things I noticed, and this is, I think, how business building works, is, you launch a business based on problems that you saw elsewhere. And so when I was running Boondockers Welcome, we had a very popular newsletter, that drove a lot of business to us. We'd send out once a week to our subscribers, here are all of our new hosts this week. And we would drive, several $1,000s worth of sales every week with that email towards the end. So it was a huge revenue generator for us. And then actually, after we had sold, as I was sort of transferring all of our assets over to our acquirers, I happened to go in and, was downloading our list data from our newsletter provider, and noticed that we were using a double opt-in mailing list, right? You have to sign up and then get the email and click confirm to make sure you actually get on the list. And I could see suddenly, only by digging into like some exports, that there was a huge number of people who weren't actually completing that second step. And, you think some of them might be spammers, but I'm looking at the email addresses and it's like, no, these seem like legitimate people. And, it was like 40% of the subscribers never actually completed that confirmation step. And so I went and did some research, and yeah, this is a known problem. Double opt-in lists are, standard, especially in Europe with GDPR rules, and in North America as well, just for, keeping a good, clean list. But the number of people who don't complete that opt-in step is, anywhere between 20 and 80%, depending on your list sometimes. So MailChimp used to default to a double opt-in list, and they actually stopped because they're like, no, there's just too many people. And of course, they make money when people sign up. They don't make money if those people don't complete their sign up. So they actually turned off the default double opt-in list, which I still am a fan of the double opt-in list. I don't want my list to get bombed by people who just go start throwing in other people's email addresses. Anyway, so SubscribeSense essentially is tools to help increase that confirmation rate. So there's a few different tacks that we use, but it's essentially a JavaScript snippet that you can throw on to your collection page and then on your thank you page, and it provides things like sniper links, which is essentially a link that will take that user directly into their inbox and find that email for you, because most people are using Gmail, Yahoo, some kind of webmail program. So you can just link directly into their inbox with a search parameter in there, and it will bring up your email for them. Or reminder emails. If they don't respond to that first one, if they don't click, there's a couple of options to send out a couple of reminders, and even just being able to see how you're doing there. A lot of providers don't provide insight into how many people are actually confirming. You have to go in using their APIs or download spreadsheets and start doing analysis to really see what's happening. So even just being able to see how your subscriber confirmation rate is being affected is useful. So that's what we do.
Amazing. This sounds like a really, really useful tool. Since I've I personally just started to publish my or I don't actively publish my newsletter, but I just have a newsletter. And I also heard from many people that this is a very, very important thing, that you actually don't want to lose people, but you also want to maintain a high quality email list.
Yeah. And there's lots of things that you can do sort of as an individual. You can tweak and A/B test all sorts of different things, but the goal with SubscribeSense is to make it easy. It's like throw one line of JavaScript in, and then sort of it does most of the difficult stuff for you.
And at which stage are you there at the moment? So is it established, profitable company, or are you still validating your idea? How is it going?
So I'm in between those two. It's at this point, I'm still sort of beta testing with some customers, and I'm happy to take on some more beta testing. I'm expecting to start charging people soon, but at this point, I am not making money yet. But part of that was, wanting to really get a good idea from my beta testers as to how much benefit they're really getting from it, and making sure that we're providing that value, and knowing based on that, what I can really charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And would you say that your experience with your first company now helps you, or in which sense does it help you to work on SubscribeSense today?
It definitely helps me in a lot of ways, mostly in just knowing that it's not going to market itself, I think, is one of the things, because I definitely made that mistake with Boondockers Welcome. We were lucky that we had sort of, the in that my mom's following provided. but a lot of our marketing was, there was very little marketing, especially at the beginning. There was a lot of just sitting around waiting for people to find us. So knowing those mistakes is definitely useful. And, a lot of, like I said, making sure I'm not wasting time on trying to maintain servers and, knowing what needs to be outsourced and what's worth my time and what's not. There is a lot of differences too, though, in that was a B2C business and this is more of a B2B business, right? I mean, maybe a little B2 pro consumer a bit because you're dealing with newsletter writers who aren't necessarily businesses, but it has a lot of differences because of that. Although I think most of those are to my advantage here. It's a lot easier. It's a much higher lifetime value sort of proposition. We charged, it was $50 a year for Boondockers Welcome. So you couldn't really do a lot of high touch marketing effort. Whereas with something that I'm hoping to charge, between $20 and $30 a month, that's going to be a lot more return when I try to, send cold emails or make efforts to reach people.
And in the end, you're not even competing with like existing newsletter companies, right? In the end, you're perfectly complementing them, actually.
Yeah, and that's sort of a commonality between those two businesses. Really, is that both of them were essentially have no competition directly, right? That Boondockers Welcome didn't really have anybody else who was doing that when we started, and same here. But it also means that there is an onus on me to really explain my value proposition, right? And that happened with Boondockers Welcome as well, where we started out thinking we were saving people money, and that was sort of what we were trying to use as our marketing, is like save money for your real trip. But in the end, it turned out it was much more about the community and meeting people and staying with locals who will tell you where all the great spots are that are off the beaten tourist path. And that was a much more enticing selling point than just saving a few bucks on camping, and helped bring in customers who were better fits, really. So that may well be the same case here again, where it's like I'm essentially trying to sell a product that doesn't exist. So I'm going to have to do a lot of experimenting to find what the marketing message is that really resonates.
Cool. So what are then your next steps that you're planning?
So for SubscribeSense, I am currently working with a couple of people who do consulting with. So right now I'm only integrating with ConvertKit as a first start, and people who are consulting with ConvertKit clients to try and help them grow their mailing lists. And so my goal is to use them sort of as a great opportunity to reach their clients and get them to start integrating SubscribeSense in their clients' websites. So that's where I am now. And I had a couple of little features that needed to be added that I'm working on right now, but I'm hoping to get that sort of rolling within the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm. And what are you doing to make this happen?
Well, right now it's just, I mean, I've gone back and forth between, the marketing efforts where I, sent out cold emails to a bunch of people, and that actually worked better than I expected it to. Although my cold emails, I made very sure were not, super cold. I did some research and made sure I was reaching out to people who I thought were really the best candidates, and, added some personalization that made it clear that I had done my research. And so that's given me some great leads for people to start working with. And then, right now I'm sort of adding a few features that were sort of needed based on the conversations I had with them about what their clients need. So that's where I am.
And is there anything more in which way people may eventually help you improving or validating or developing your business and your ideas further?
Well, I'm always, I have more room for more sort of beta customers right now. If anybody has a mailing list that they'd like to give us a spin on, the more data I can collect, the better I am at being able to, refine the solution and make sure it's providing value. So I would love to have anybody who hears about this and is interested in implementing us, just reach out to me and we'll get you spun up with a beta user account and you can start seeing if SubscribeSense can help increase your newsletter confirmation rate.
Cool. So that's just subscribesense.com, right?
That's right.
And any other way in which people may reach you?
You can always find me on Twitter. I know I said I was not on Twitter before, but pretty much as soon as I sold the last company, I was like, yeah, Twitter seems to be the place where people hang out. So on Twitter, you can find me at Schoolgirl, where school is spelled Skule.
Perfect. Then thank you again for taking the time.
Well, thanks for talking to me, Sam. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for taking part in this Never Employed Chat. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interviews with business owners and investors, or simply listen to the audio version in your favorite podcast directory. Make sure to follow me on all your preferred social media platforms, so that you never miss life-changing business tips. You find me on every platform with the account name samhartmann.com. Start a business, become successful, and tell me about it. See you next time.